Sarah from Funky Fossil here. Welcome to Make It Sunday. It's going to be a weekly YouTube video that I do a demo, a technique, and hopefully give you some ideas for using your Funky Fossil products and trying something a bit different, trying different ways of using them in your journals or on your cards. So I'm going to be working in one of my A5 journals. This is the one with the cover that Belinda did for us. Because I wanted to try and get a journal filled up this year and be really quite purposeful about kind of completing the pages. So I've already got some pages done here, as you can see, and I'm going to glue in these together to give them a little bit more weight. And here's the spread that I did last week that I didn't manage to get posted onto YouTube, so sorry about that. Hopefully this one will work better and the filming will actually be recorded and we'll be able to put this onto the channel. So I'm going to do a page in my journal, but I am going to work on a separate piece of paper, and this is it's an A5 journal, so I've got a page that's just trimmed down so I can work on it out of the journal and then stick it in when I'm happy with it. Just makes it easy if you're doing, as I am going to be doing today, kind of stenciling and techniques where you maybe just want to work flat onto your mat. So this is the way I'm going to do it for this particular kind of page. Now we're into September and I'm already starting to feel very autumnal. This is my favourite time of year, so I can't wait to get this kind of beautiful rich colour palette out and start using that with that kind of foliage and autumnal imagery. So that's what I'm going to do on the card today, or the page should I say. Now I will ensure that all the products that I use in this journal page will be 20% off in the shop, and I'll put the link in the description below, and you'll be able to get that 20% discount up until next Sunday when we have another video to share with you. So what I'm planning to use, and it's not absolutely fixed, I know what technique I want to do, but I'm never entirely sure how the page is going to develop. But at the moment my thinking is we're going to use 3 of our beautiful kind of foliage based stencils. So we've got the forest foliage, all that wonderful detail in that one, the tattered leaf, which is a great aperture to it, which we're going to use, and then the fantastic kind of falling leaves, which I think we had out last year, maybe even a bit longer than that, but lovely movement on this one. I think I'll be adding a sentiment, and our A6 Words to Live By stamp set is a perfect one for journaling sentiments, particularly because they're quite reflective and they're not necessarily too occasions based. So I think I will probably add a sentiment from this stamp set. And one of the techniques I want to do with our stencils today is use the stencils with some heavy body gel, or you could use texture paste if you've got texture paste, anything that's going to give you a little bit of dimension on your stenciled image, and some embossing powders. It's one of my favourite ways of adding a little bit of texture and interest to the stenciled image. So I'll be using our Mediterranean Moods trio of embossing powders, and that will be 20% off this week too. So I think that's everything covered. Now, I don't want to spend ages going through product because the focus of these sessions really are to do some making, and again, none of this is you don't need any of this specifically. What I want you to kind of take away from the demo is the techniques and the ideas that I use here. So I think I'm going to start with this large tattered leaf. And we're going to do just a bit of straightforward inking through this fabulous image. I love the fact it's got that kind of, let's say, slightly distressed outline, so it already kind of isn't just a flat leaf. And I'm going to come in from the side. So again, we're not going to be putting our stencil directly in the centre of the page. We're going to be stenciling off the edges to give us a bit of movement. So I don't think I'll tape it down because I'm only going to be using inks at this stage, and so I'll be using one of our blending brushes, and I'm just having a little bit of a debate with myself about the colours. What I'm thinking I'll do, and you'll have seen if you've watched me use stencils before, I'm sure you'll have seen me do this technique. I'm planning to kind of go back over this image with the detailed stencil, the forest foliage. So I'm not necessarily wanting to get the colour on here, on this first inking. I don't want it to be too strong, too dark, because then we won't necessarily see the detail of the stenciling we had over the top. So I'm going in with Rusty Hinge and just a light bit of pressure where you've got areas of the stencil where you think it might move when you're doing your circular movement with your brush. Then just pull the ink in. Just kind of keep going until you feel you're not getting much more ink coming off the brush. I think I'll use a little bit of fossilized amber. This is a very bright yellow brush because I think it's had mustard seed on it, but it's close enough to fossilized amber that it won't be a problem. And because it's a big aperture stencil, this is a great one for using your bigger brushes, because you're going to be able to pull more ink in and onto the paper more quickly. So I'm just trying to think about the kind of colours we see at this time of year. Well, it's a bit early. It's a bit early here in the UK for the leaves to be quite turning yet, but that's what I've got in my mind. Add a little bit of Rusty Hinge again. And also for a technique like this, sometimes it's quite nice if the centre of your image is a little bit paler, because it will mean that the detail that you're going to add in a second pops even more. I'm thinking, should I add? I haven't used Crackling Campfire in forever, so I might just add a little bit of this richer red, reddy brown, just at the edges. You can see there the way that I'm moving the brush. I'm just literally touching the edges of the stenciled image. This is a great way of giving a little bit more definition to the outline. I think that'll be fine. Let's have a look. And it just straight away, it's almost like it glows off the page, doesn't it? Those colours are just glorious, but equally having the yellows in there, having a bit of a lighter shading around the centre, just means that the image has its own kind of luminous quality. Now I'm just going to go and repeat that step one more time with exactly the same colours as you've seen, kind of moving now towards the bottom of the page. So I will speed this bit up so that you can just see again how I've applied the ink, but doing exactly the same as you've just watched me do. So this bit will be a little bit quicker. So can you see there when you were watching me ink that second leaf that the stencil moved just slightly as I was inking up? Easy enough on this kind of image to reposition it if that happens, but it's one of those things that if you are working off the edge of a page, you can get a little bit more movement. So if that's ever something you're worried about, then it takes no time at all to taper down. But I don't think we lost any of the definition on the image in that second inking. So now what we want to do is create a little bit of detail, and I'm going to use our beautiful forest foliage stencil to achieve that. I'm going to put it over the stencil, over the inked image, and then we'll just line that stencil back up over the top, so we know that where we ink this second layer is going to sit neatly on top of the on top of the base that we've already got. So this would be a good idea to take this one down because we've now got two stencils in the mix, and of course the mylar is quite slippy, so they may well move when I'm brushing over the top. So I'm not too worried about particularly taping around the edges. I mean, sometimes I tape around the edges purely to ensure that I don't inadvertently ink off the edge of the stencil and put ink where I don't want it. It's not really an issue with this particular larger leaf. But I put the dye in my mind now, so I'm just going to put that there just to mask it off. So now when I go in and add the stenciled layer over the top of this large leaf, I'm just going to have a think about the colours, because obviously I want them to be harmonious, but I want them to be sufficiently different or slightly deeper in tone so we actually can see the image. So I think I'll use the fossilised amber for this one. I think I might go with I'll go with the crackling campfire and the ground espresso. We can see how that turns out. So still obviously hold your stencil in place. The blending brushes are perfect for this kind of technique because you want something that's going to make contact with the paper, if that makes sense. So the blending brush will quite happily work across the two layers of mylar that you've got down here. Let's put a little bit of this brown. I've got quite a dark brown here. I don't think I've got a lighter one in the room with me, so I'm just going to be quite sparing with its application. I think this is quite a dry brush, a dry powder, so I think we should be okay with it actually. And that will just tone down the stronger orange elements of the crackling campfire. And we shall see what we've got. So hopefully we'll still have that nice glow of that fossilised amber coming up beneath the leaf, and that will show the definition there. That's gorgeous, isn't it? So it's a really lovely way of adding interest to a large aperture stencil. I'm going to repeat that, but I won't speed it up. I'm just going to stop the recording, repeat that step, and then we'll get on to adding our second stencil with some texture paste to add a little bit more interest and dimension to this journal page. See you in a minute. Right, so I've inked up the second leaf in the way I showed you with the first one, and you can see how beautiful they both look. So I'm just thinking, what I think I probably will do is add some ink around the edges just to draw the eye in. It's something that I do a lot, and kind of bring those colours right the way around the edge of the page. But before I do that, let's add this wonderful kind of cascade of leaves. So they're kind of smaller versions of this one, so the imagery will be repeated, and by having that kind of curve coming through, it's going to kind of connect these two larger images on either side of the page. Or that's the theory. We shall see when we put it down. So this time I am going to add some masking tape because I'm going to be adding some gel medium. You've got loads of ways of doing this technique. You don't need to use a clear gel medium. You could use a white texture paste, basically anything that's going to give you a body, going to give you kind of a raised surface, but also is going to catch the embossing powder and hold it because it's a wet surface. So I'm really looking for something that's going to give me dimension. Another factor to consider, or another way of adding further depth of colour to your design, is if you're using a translucent embossing powder, so one that is going to kind of give you a tint. Then if you used a clear body like this, then you'll still be able to see through that tint, which can give you a really lovely kind of glassy-like look. But equally, you could add colour. You could ink this stencil like I've just been doing with this larger one. Then you could go over with your clear body, and then you could go over with your translucent embossing powder. So there are lots of different effects you can create with this technique. It's very, very easy to do. Because I am going to be spreading kind of a gel medium on with a palette knife, and I am very heavy-handed with these things, I am being super cautious and adding the masking tape kind of around the edges of the stencil. So this is partly to hold it in place, and so my hands can be free, but also partly just to ensure that if my spreading gets a bit over enthusiastic, I've got a little bit more of an overlap before I actually hit the card. So I love this. I do love this Pentart heavy body gel. In fact, when I was getting supplies together to make this video, I realised how many pots of this I have unopened, ready to go, because I do like to use it in projects. So this is one that I typically use, but equally another one that I will use on a regular basis is the Ranger white texture paste. That's what the word eluded me there. Now let me just get my palette knife, which I saw only a second ago and has now disappeared. Here it is. So I'm going to just pick up the paste. Now, of course, I'm saying this is clear. It looks white, but as most of you will appreciate, this will dry clear. So it will go onto your project with a kind of cloudy or a white appearance, but it will dry clear. I'm just being generous in my application, because you can then always scrape off the excess, but it's quite nice to make sure you've got a good coverage over the top. Pop it back into the pot. Now, of course, another medium you could be using to create a beautiful autumnal effect, and one that I will go into in more detail in another video, would be our Stellar paste. So if you think, for example, the Spellbound, that beautiful coppery brown would be a beautiful kind of shade on this project. So there are just so many ways of using your stencils and so many things you can use them with, but this has been one of my kind of long term favourites. In terms of finding a different use for embossing powders as well. So it's not always just about heat embossing your line art on a stamp. They can be great for adding textural finishes. So I'm just peeling away my masking tape carefully. I often get asked what masking tape I use. This is a frog, kind of just like a painter's tape. It is good. I rarely have tears with it, but I can't say I never have tears. If you are working on a delicate surface, it's definitely worth just kind of tapping it off on your clothes before you apply it to your cardstock, just to take any excess adhesive away. Just thinking, have I missed a bit? Oh, I can't. I'm going to put my fingers in it now. That would. Oh no, it's there. So of course this stencil needs to go into water, because the texture paste will dry, or the gel medium will dry on it and create kind of a solid coating, which will be much more difficult to get off than ink. So here we have our leaves, and if I left this now as it was, they would dry clear on the project, which would be a lovely effect, really kind of subtle, almost like kind of a clear heat embossed effect on my project. But I want to add colour and dimension to them, and I want to do that using my embossing powders. So we've got a wet surface here, just like we do with sticky ink, and I can now add some colour to them with the embossing powders. The way I'm planning to do this is I'm going to be taking a generous pinch. This is the Tuscan terracotta from the Mediterranean Moods trio, and we're just going to be sprinkling it over. So I don't want a single solid colour across these leaves. This is about autumn and about all the various shades that we see in the foliage. So almost like you're putting seasoning onto your cooking. We can just let that embossing powder just catch the wet texture paste. I don't want it to go all over. I want it to kind of stay where I've sprinkled it, so I'm just flipping it down. There's hardly anything there really to catch and decant back into the pot, but if that's something that you want to be aware of, you can absolutely do that. Let's add a bit of olive grove now. This again from the Mediterranean Moods trio. Because obviously this texture paste is going to stay wet for a little time. You've got lots of room for manoeuvre with this technique, more so potentially than when you have just ink and the drying time of ink to work with. Now what I think, I'm not going to add the blue from the Mediterranean Moods trio, because I don't think that will go with the vibe of this page, but I think I'm going to add a bit more of the terracotta, because that will tie in nicely with the stenciled leaves. And then I'll probably just top it off with some of the verdant, which is one of the embossing powders that came out with our Summer Twilight trio. I think it was last year. I've probably got about 4 or 5 trios of that left, if that. So if that's one you want to have a look at, then do. So verdant's kind of got a darker green to it, almost like a rustic wilderness green, but it's also got lots of speckles of gold in it as well, which is lovely. So now I've got the kind of coverage where, as I want it, I'm just literally going to throw this last one on, and it will catch any areas where there is currently no other embossing powder. And even before that heat sets, I can see it's going to give me a lovely look. Now there's a couple of things here that I'll point out to show you not to worry about them. You can see the embossing powder has caught in other areas of the card, and of course I used it on a sheet of card where even the distress ink might have still been a bit damp. However, we're going to leave this all to dry now. I'm not going to attempt to heat set this while the paste is wet, because the risk is then the paste will start to bubble under the heat, and you get a great effect, but it's not quite what I'm going for here. So I'm going to leave this paste to dry. It's caught the embossing powder. The powder will stay in that paste, and once the paste is dry, we can then heat set it to get that powder to turn. But of course, because everything will be dry by then, we'll be able to brush off this excess embossing powder before we heat set it, and it won't be left on the page when we come to apply the heat. So I'm going to turn off the camera for probably 10-15 minutes while I let my gel medium dry, and then we will have the fun of heat setting that when I come back. See you in a minute. Okay, so I think I've given the gel medium long enough to dry here. It's not completely dry, and you can tell that because you can see that kind of dimpling still on the back of the paper, so you know there's still some moisture in the medium, but I think it should be dry enough for us to apply some heat and turn that gorgeous embossing powder into a lovely glossy finish. So I shall start up the heat gun, and let's see whether I can try and make sure that you can see the powder turning under the camera. going to turn it onto a slower heat because even just then I could see the paste bubbling a little bit, so it might be a bit too strong on fast. It definitely is bubbling here, so I've probably not left it long enough to dry the paste. What I'm doing is I see it bubbling, I'm skipping on to the next one and then we can go back and it's just calmed down a little bit. So you really do want to leave this the gel medium or your texture paste completely dry, just to avoid it reacting with the heat when you apply it. I do quite like the bubbling. Oops. I do quite like the bubbling effect as well. Can you see what I've done here? Let me show you. I'll put my thumb in it while it was heating. Can you see that white mark there? So I think I can apply more more embossing powder. Let's have a see. Have an experiment and see if we can fix that. I don't know if it will now have dried enough, the actual paste. Yeah, it's not really going to catch it. That's annoying. That's very annoying. It's not so noticeable that I won't carry on with it, but it's just because the paste was heated and I just put my nail on it while it was still. You can hardly see it at all actually. And when you're building up embossing powders, while they're still molten and still melted, you can sprinkle more on top. So that's another way you can keep your colours variegated as you're going. Let's pour everything. This takes a bit longer to turn because you can imagine you've got your gel medium holding the powder rather than an ink, so you've just got to let that kind of heat pass through it sufficiently. It's a bit like when you're heat embossing onto MDF rather than onto paper. There's a thicker substrate there which needs time to absorb that heat. Can you see the texture you've got there? There's some real lovely speckles of gold as well from the verdant, which has got that gold in the mix. I really like that, and it's got some lovely dimension to it as well. I'm sure I could catch that on the camera. So I was waiting for it to cool down a little bit, and it looks like that's all now melted into the paste. So that powder won't go anywhere now that it's set, and it's set into the paste. It won't brush off later. So I really like that. It's a really lovely autumnal look. Let's finish this page then, and all I'm going to do, really simple, a couple of finishing touches just to bring this page together, because I'm conscious you've got your kind of two focal background images. You've got your sweep of your stencil, but they've got that white space all around the edge. So I'm just going to add a little bit that embossing powder away. I'm just going to add a little bit of colour around the edge to define, frame it almost, and pull your eye in. I think I've got rusty hinge here. I'm not going to choose the same colour though, because I want to continue with the vibe I've got on the stenciling, where we've got those lovely different colours playing alongside each other. So let's put a bit of ground espresso. And it's a really simple thing to do, but it's just one of those little finishing touches that just can really define your page or your card, depending on what you're working on. And I do think kind of these falling leaves, these autumnal colours are great for cards, for all kinds of recipients. Could even be a sympathy card, to be fair, because that kind of slightly mellow feel to the to that kind of change in season. Rusty hinge, back to some ground espresso. Oops, that's a strong area. Quite like that. Remember, this is a page in our journal, so this is our space for playing and experimenting. I quite often make a journal page and then kind of either the lessons I've learned or the techniques or the ideas that have kind of come out on the journal page will then make their way onto a card. So this is a nice space in which you can give things a go and translate them into card making if you're inspired to do so. So I'm still wanting to keep, and I think you can see as I'm going around here, I'm still wanting to keep that white space in the centre. I don't want to lose that white, I just want to ensure that the page is kind of starting to draw in a little bit. And let's put a sentiment on from our Words to Live By. And I'll stamp it in a dark brown. I'll stamp it in Fallen Leaves by Versifying Claire, because that will work well with the palette we've got here. And I think, given we're talking autumn, let's go for Be Thankful, because that's the season for that kind of gratitude-based journaling. Acrylic block. I've been doing all this sitting down. I'm going to stand up just to start this. I've never been able to successfully stamp straight. Sat down. Versifying Claire. And this is one of the reasons I quite often like to work on a page outside of the journal and then adhere it in, is if you've got a bumpy journal, you've already got lots of pages completed, it can be quite difficult to stamp directly onto the page because you've already got an uneven surface. So working on a separate piece of card gives you the option both to decide not to put it in your journal if you're not happy with it, but also it gives you a flat surface to work with. And I think the last thing I'm going to do, should I go? Yeah, I'll go Crackling Campfire. I'm just going to add a few splatters, and they'll kind of carry with the splatters that will go around the leaves from the stenciling, but also just tie it all together. Just got a wet paintbrush here. Not wet enough. Just catching. I'm trying, I mean obviously you can't control splatters, that's the point of them, but I'm trying to kind of splatter along the line of that swirl of leaves. So we're staying with the movement that has given us on the page. I'm not worried about the splattering going onto the sentiment because it's with VersaFine Clair, so that is doesn't react to water, so it's not going to move and the splatter catches it. Bit of ground espresso just to. I'm just mixing the two with the brush. Nice splatters, aren't wanting to splatter today. There we go. The more you fixate on trying to get the splatters in a specific place, the more you are doomed to failure. Right, let me just try this area here. And I won't stick it into my journal just yet because obviously I will wait for my splatters to dry. Don't want to smudge them all. But while I was waiting for my gel medium to dry, I just cover the other part of my 2-page spread in the journal with some of the gorgeous papers from Poetry of Trees. So of course perfect to go with the leaf theme, and of course you've got the autumnal colours in some of the papers which I've used here. So I think that I've got there with a little tag. And what I'm going to do, as I did with the previous project, is I'm just going to journal the technique that I used in the video on the other side of the page. So that will be a nice record for me of what I've done. But you can see how beautifully those two pages will go together. This is just literally papers, nothing more, a bit of inking. But it's a nice accompaniment to the artwork we've got on the other side. So you've got two techniques there. You've got your layered stenciling with your detail going in over the solid base stencil. You've got your use of embossing powders with texture paste or gel medium on your stencil to create a bit of dimension and interest. And I think both those two designs, but also those two techniques have worked really well together on this page. I hope you've liked the demo. Please do like and subscribe so that you catch our weekly Sunday videos. I will put the details of the products I've used in this page in the description box below, and remember those products will be discounted by 20% this week until our next Make It Sunday video, where we'll be sharing more techniques and ideas. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I look forward to seeing anything you make that is being inspired by or using similar techniques. So please do share them in our Fun with Funky Fossil Facebook group. Bye for now.